Hey, welcome to Modern Day Debate. Today we are debating whether or not God exists, and we're starting right now. So, very glad to have you here, everybody. This is going to be an all-out blast. We have two gentlemen here who are going to come together for the first time, not only together, but it's the first time we get to have them here on Modern Day Debate. And I want to say thank you for the debaters for coming on and joining us today. We're going to introduce them in a second, but I'll just quickly lay out the format so you guys know how it's going to go. I think most people like the open discussion, and our debaters were kind of like, hey, let's do kind of a hybrid so we can kind of reap the benefits of both worlds. So we will do opening statements, then 45 minutes of civil discourse, open dialogue, and then we will go to 5-minute closing statements followed by Q&A. So if you guys have questions, of course, just start with a @ModernDayDebate in the comments, and we will look for those questions, pull them into a list, and then ask them at the end. So with that, very excited to introduce our debaters. So first, I want to introduce the person who will, I guess, be starting anyway. So it's Adam is our theist guest, and Adam's taking the affirmative position on God existing. Adam, we're so glad to have you here. If you want to share about what you've been up to in terms of your studies, or if it blog, YouTube, anything like that, we do have Adam's link or email instead of link down in the description below, so you can actually contact him. Really cool. And then we will introduce Frustrated Atheist. We're glad to have you here as well. And so with that, Adam, glad to have you here if you want to share what you've been up to.
Thank you, James, and thank you for having me. Thank you for bringing this all together, and thank you, Russ, for accepting this debate. I haven't put anything up upon YouTube yet, uploaded anything, or upon my website just yet. I hope to be able to pretty soon, but for now I've just been studying generally certain fields concerning the scriptures and general knowledge. So that is necessarily what I will be endeavoring to speak upon today, is the reality of God's existence, but particularly the God of the Bible. So
you bet. Well, we're stoked to have you here, Adam. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your ideas here, and the audience is excited to have you as well. So with that, everybody's also excited to have you here, Frustrated Atheist. We appreciate both of you guys have been so cordial and awesome during the emails and setting up this deal, and so you guys have been respectful to each other, and that's what we're excited about, is respectful debates with new ideas. So anyway, Frustrated Atheist, Russ, if you want to share about what you've been doing at your channel, by the way, everybody, his link is down in the description. And hey, even if you don't agree with these guys, what's the harm in checking out their stuff, right? Because you can go check out their stuff, and if you disagree wholeheartedly, well, then you could say you're kind of knowing your enemy. You're at least getting it straight from them, what they believe, rather than just a summary. So you're pushing yourself, you could say, intellectually speaking. So anyway, Frustrated Atheist, glad to have you here. What have you been up to at your channel?
Yeah, as y'all know, I'm Frustrated Atheist. I make content where I debunk nonsense claims, whether they be from random theists that I find on the internet or pseudoscience that is just out there. I also try my best to spread out science, actual science that we know, and not some of the more ridiculous claims that are out there, such as young Earth creationism and all that other good stuff. That's at least when I make videos, and when I make videos there, I find them shit, but other people find them pretty decent content. So if you want to go ahead and check that out, that's awesome. If not, okay.
We appreciate your humility. So this is going to be a fun debate. Like I said, I love this hybrid format, so I think it's going to be a great time. And so if you're new here, feel free to hit that subscribe button, as we will have future debates coming up, and hopefully we'll even get to have these gentlemen on again. I have a feeling this is going to go very well, and so who knows, we can hope for it. And so with that, I'm starting the clock. So there's kind of some flexibility with the clock. Is we're going to go like 12 to 14 minutes as an option for the speakers, And if need be, we might, even have a little bit more flexibility, like a bumper of 15 seconds or 30 seconds. And that's not required to be taken by the debaters. If they want to end early, up to them. So with that, I have got the clock set. And so Adam being the affirmative, the floor is yours. I'm going to start the clock on your first word.
I commonly hear nowadays amongst atheists that there is either no evidence for God or that the evidence that is brought forth does not sufficiently support the claims which theists are propounding necessarily. And I take a quote from Aaron Ra, a pretty prominent atheist voice amongst the community, in his first foundational falsehood of creationism video, in which he says, in every case, the proposed creator is supernatural, meaning that he says it, but he is not a part of perceptible reality. Therefore, he says it, but he is undetectable by any testable means and can only be assumed to exist for subjective emotional reasons or as the result of cultural indoctrination, rather than because of any measurable evidence or logical rationale. And I would agree with the man that it is utterly erroneous to believe upon evidence for the existence of God, who is necessarily immaterial, supernatural, transcendent, by subjective emotional reasons or cultural indoctrination. Yet I do not agree with the fact that there is no logical rationale to evidence the reality of God's existence, and that is necessarily my proposition, that there is evidence for the existence of God, specifically the God of the Bible, but it is observable evidence. It is evidence which is able to be deduced, and through logical reason, or reason after a logical manner, is able to be comprehended, understood, and therefore the mind is able to be convinced of an invisible and immaterial, a transcendent and supreme being. So to set this forth, I am going to be taking bringing forth my evidences from those things which are most near unto us necessarily, such as life and matter, reality itself, which we are most sure of in a certain way, at least of their realities, in which we can take evidences from. Which brings me to my first claim that, and this is according to creation, necessarily the nature of creation. My first claim is dependent upon that, or is taken from that, from creation and in the nature of things created, that matter and life must be created by a power above itself, because something cannot work above its ability. Something cannot do that which is above its ability to do, such as a dead body. A dead body cannot create anything at all. It cannot create anything complex, nor can it create anything simple. It can't create anything at all. It can't do that which is above its power. We ourselves, as human beings, we cannot lift a 10-ton boulder. We may be able to create certain things to lift a boulder that size, but we ourselves cannot. We are limited in our ability. And so my claim is that matter and life as we know it, it must be created by a power above itself, because, finish that. That's the finish of that. In this claim, it's important to go back to the beginning of things necessary, the origin of the cosmos and life itself, and look at these origins, truly dissect them, evaluate them, examine them, and look at what is the most logical reason for their creation, for them coming into existence, coming into their existence. Sorry. We can see that in the atheistical worldview necessarily, that there is either a time where there was nothing, or that matter is eternal. And the problem with matter being eternal is that we know that things are mutable. Things do have an end. And so you're saying when something is eternal that it cannot have an end, but there's a contradiction there that the universe is eternal, but then somehow it produces matter, or somehow it is also mutable, because necessarily the whole cosmos is one essence of itself. But we know that things do cease to exist in the cosmos, or it is possible for it to be so. So there's a logical contradiction right there. But then also going to nothing, the claim that nothing brought forth something, which I don't know how widely accepted that is at the moment, but it is still a claim. And the extremely great problem with that is that the concept of nothing has never been observed to create anything at all, ever. It's never been observed. And it has no power to do anything, because nothing is nothing necessarily. Not the scientific nothing, but the philosophical nothing, actual nothing, which is not able to do anything. And so we see this so constantly observed. Nothing cannot do something or bring forth something. And but when we look at when we descend to materialistic things, we can see, like human inventions. Sorry, when we descend to human inventions, such as a car or a phone, things which are near to living matter, things which have energy and have power unto them, which are functional in their natures, we see and can deduce that they have always been brought into existence. They've always been brought into existence, and before that, they have always not existed. And what I mean by that is, the car, for example, it did not exist at one time, but yet, in the mind of man, it was conceived. The idea of a car was conceived. And with that conception, with that thought, with that engineering necessarily, the will of man did then go about and take action to bringing that concept, which he had in his mind, into existence. And so we can look at the things, such as the material things, and see that they have always been brought into existence. There's a time when they were brought into existence necessarily. An important distinction of this is that those which have been or brought forth certain complex things, like a car or a phone or a computer, they have always had power to bring forth these things. A phone has never brought forth a human into existence because it cannot work above its power. It cannot work above its ability. It's not able to bring forth a human being into existence. It's not able to bring forth life in a certain way into existence. And so we can see the logical rationale in a way that that something which is created by a power which is above it in nature necessarily. However, the difficulty with this is that, or the objection is that it can be concluded or come to, I guess, that who created God then, if something must be created by a power or with ability above its limits, I guess, in a way. But and this does produce a problem indeed, yet the nature of God, which is propounded, is very distinct in the certain properties of things to render it attestable in a way to mutability, immutability, certain things of that, such as, well, I take the example of helium. Helium is not subject to the laws of gravity because of its properties. And so when we say that God is not created, we are saying he has properties which are not subject unto a creator. He's necessarily independent, while all these other things are dependent, such as a human being, which is dependent upon oxygen, food, certain things of that sort. And so, to conclude this point, that things which are created, life, matter, must be created by a power which is above that which it is constantly proven in reality, such as with cars and computers and such. How can it not then be applied unto something such as a human being, which is very complex in its nature, but not only just a human being, but all of creation necessarily, but all of the creatures in this planet specifically, and particularly all of the multitudes of various kinds, the birds and the fish, all living creatures in the seas and on Earth, and in the insects, which is in practically an innumerable number. How can that then be? How can those things, life as be brought forth from nothing or just matter itself? Now, this brings me to my second claim, that complexity, concatenation, and particular function these three are always products of an engineer, those three combined. Concatenation, complexity, and particular function. We always see those as impressions of an engineer's mind with them. We look at things in the visible world necessarily, such as a computer, which is very complex. It has RAM, it has CPU, it has a hard drive, it has a motherboard, and we see that it has very particular functions. It has concatenation. It works together very well, and it is very complex in its nature. We deduce from certain grounds that this computer has a creator, because it is practically impossible that these things, which are very complex, are brought together either of itself or just by some random process. We know that
Got about a 1 minute warning for the 14-minute time slot, and we can have a little bit of flexibility of there, because Frustrated Atheist said that's okay, but just so you know.
Thank you. We can deduce from that or these things which we see with our eyes, even such as an internal combustion engine, that an engineer was behind it because of its particular function, its complexity and concatenation of it, its certain properties. We don't say that it was created just as a rash or hasty or ungrounded presumptuous notion. There are very specific reasons, but then we can descend again to the human body, which is utterly complex. It has very particular functions to it, and certain organs and parts of the body are finely tuned, if we can so say, like the eye. It has just the right amount of pressure to it. If it's too much or too less, then it will completely be enclosed, crushed, or it will go blind. And there's so many of those things of the body. How can we not look at something such as an internal combustion engine or a computer, or how can we look at those things and say that they have an engineer, but then look to the body and say that there is not a wise mind behind it when the body is more complex than these things? How is that logically rational in any way, shape, or form? I'll stop there because I know it's just about a minute over.
Oh, I think you were less than a minute over, but we're excellent opening statement, clear, articulate, and so we will now go to what I'm confident will also be a clear and articulate opening statement from Frustrated Atheist. So stoked to have you here as well. If you want to start, I will go again on your first word for when I start the clock.
All right, so first off, I want to thank James here for hosting the debate/discussion, and as y'all know, it is on the existence of God. And if you're not too sure on what position I'm taking, well, then I would suggest that you look up the term atheist and figure out if you know which side. So I had a first question, which Adam here answered in the very beginning, which was, which God was he referring to? And so as somewhat of a follow-up question, what made him choose such a God? Why is this particular God so the one that has done all this stuff? Why not say the All-Father Odin? Why not Zeus? Why not any other God? Why is it just this particular God? Now, and of course he can answer that once we get into the actual discussion part. Let's see here. Now, so there's a couple of ways that we can actually figure out, since he has chosen Yahweh, we can figure out how Yahweh is not, that if there is a God of any sort, that Yahweh is definitely not it. And we can use that by both a more naturalistic approach and from a philosophical approach. So the naturalistic approach he tries to bring up with the whole entire figuring out, why we're here and all this stuff, which is still more of a philosophical question. But one of the biggest problems with that is that the God of the Bible, Yahweh here, is the one who created everything in order to make the earth, the heavens, and everything. So he would have to have been the creator of every single aspect of it, including energy. Energy is, as we know by the first law of thermodynamics, can neither be created nor destroyed, which means that in itself is eternal. There's nothing you can do to create or destroy energy. The best you can do is transform it by making it go into a different state of energy. And so for God to be able to create everything, energy is one of the most important components in the creation of the cosmos. This is one of the biggest components, and he didn't create that. Now you can go ahead and say that it's possible that it comes through him, but in that case you would have to actually prove that he exists in order for that to happen. And just judging by what we know about with science alone, we don't go after hypotheses that have too many assumptions, and that one does. So to me, we should definitely stay away from any kind of naturalistic approach when it comes to this topic, for that reason alone. Now, when it comes to the more philosophical issues, we have things like, we have the problems with divine hiddenness and the problems of evil, which are two very big issues when it comes to the God of the Bible, who is, by necessity from any doctrine that you really come across, is the omni of everything. He's omnipresent, he is omnibenevolent, he is omni everything. And with that whole entire argument, you have the like I said, comes to the problem of evil, which Epicurus actually had worded it perfectly when he said, Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. If he's able but not willing, then he is malevolent. If he's both able and willing, then whence cometh evil? Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? That is one of the best summations of the problem of evil. Then, like I said, you also have divine hiddenness, where God is supposed to be everywhere, and yet we don't see him. There's no way that we can find him. And the thing is if this is a God who is outlined by the Bible as wanting to have a personal relationship with us, then why he would know exactly what that is. What is going to convince every single one of us that he exists, and would then, by necessity, since he wants a relationship with us, would then show us these things to make us all know that he exists. So these are some of the biggest issues with the whole entire God of the Bible existing. And to be honest, I have nothing more really to say. So I yield my time to, I guess, the Q&A.
You bet. Well, thank you very much, Frustrated Atheist. Glad to have your opening statement, and we will do that, adding the time to the Q&A. So from there, this is what I think everybody enjoys most of all, is we're going to just open it up to an open dialogue. So the debaters, this is based on your opening statements. Either one of you can start in terms of getting the dialogue rolling if there's something you heard in the opposite statement that really concerned you.
Okay, well, I do kind of want my the first question I ask, what is it about Yahweh that makes him the God that has created everything, and why not some of the other pantheons of different gods?
For sure, a plausible question, or a good question.
Well, better yet, what made you come to that determination is what I should say.
It much stems from the observation of certain things in reality, such as the complexity, the harmony of certain things in nature, the almost impossibility, I guess. Well, it is practically almost an impossibility of the laws, the gases, the distance of the earth from the sun, everything which makes the earth habitable to come together at in such a precise way, without there being some type of wisdom, because it's seen so constantly just in human inventions, as an example, that there is always wisdom behind it. And you can tell that because even with such as like a Tesla, the car, that the engineer of that car is wise in his ways, I guess, in his knowledge of the properties of how to make an engine in the way of which he has, and that above other engineers. And so you can see just by the impressions of wisdom in the things created, that there is a certain wisdom behind that, an engineer behind that. And so when you look at, or when I look at the things and observe those things with my eyes, certain things such as photosynthesis out in the open, or erythropoiesis in our bodies, the making of red blood cells, I look at those things and I do try to deduce that these things, what is the way by which these things are able to come together? Because this is reality. These things actually exist. They're real, and they have to come about by some way, because we haven't always existed. Humans haven't always. There must have been some creation. What is the most plausible explanation, I guess, for these things to come into be? and I see that it takes a very great power to bring something into existence. It takes ability to bring it into existence, which is somewhat what I was trying to say in my first claim. And so when I see that, and I see how living matter coming forth is a very great matter in a way, it shows me that, and it has never been observed necessarily. It's never, I mean, we can look at what the certain claims such as, and I know you said you didn't want to look at naturalistic, but we have to.
Well, what I'm saying is that, to be honest, the naturalistic approach is actually a point against you, because every single thing that you've described when it comes to nature has an explanation in nature. We have explanations for these. We have explanations on how photosynthesis arise. We have explanations on how the eye was developed. We have explanations on all these things, and none of them are God did it. They have naturalistic explanations, which is why I'm saying that going to nature, or to even try to use a naturalistic explanation to come to the existence of a God, is a faulty one, because because everything in nature has a naturalistic explanation.
That's not necessarily true, though, because you do not have an answer for biogenesis. I mean, your claims are abiogenesis.
We have great hypothesis, but right now it's due to the fact that there are multiple different mechanisms on how it could have arose, but these are still more reliable hypothesis than God did it.
When a Christian theist or professing Christian theist does regress or divert to the God did it claim, I guess, it's never for no reason. There are very specific reasons why someone says God has done it. Just why?
Well, if you look at some of the more notable scientists and naturalists who were theists, each one had it because they've extended their limit, but it was always revised by somebody further down the line. So, for instance, you have Isaac Newton, who had discovered the relationship between the moon, the sun, and the earth, and he had, I think, one other planet within his construct, where once he tried to add the other planets that they knew of, it kind of went into chaos, and so he kind of threw his hands in the air and said that it must be God who's doing this. But then somebody else later on comes down the line and says, well, no, because there's all these other things, all these other planets that he figures out how it works. And then when he extended his reach, he goes, well, God must be doing it. And it happens that way all the time. I mean, hell, you can look at just the whole entire idea of thunder and lightning. The Norse mythology believes that was Thor looking out for them. You have people who believe that it was Zeus at one point in time. But as information, as we start to gain knowledge on the naturalistic world, there are explanations for these things.
Well, there are in the way of their function, in their present function, but what I'm saying is in their origins, or what I'm necessarily.
Okay, so you think that, like, for instance, that the planets had to come into existence due to God?
I think that they had to come into existence by a power, as we have seen everything in existence, which is materialistic, come forth into existence by a power, necessarily, by a mind conceiving the thought and then bringing it forth through certain materials. And so
how I have a quick question. How well versed are you in science?
I would say I know general science. I try to understand evolution
Okay, well, so let me get it to where I'm trying to get to. What is your idea on? Have you even looked into planetary formation?
I have looked into planetary formation, but that's the thing though, we have not seen a planet form because
Actually, we have.
we, well,
As a matter of fact, it was actually last year in 2018. We had actually found the first. We had seen different stages of planet formation, but we just came into finding the actual beginning stages of the gases and everything by force of gravity coming together to create planets. And we are still observing this today. We have seen planets being formed in different stages, and so to say that we haven't seen a planet form is actually false, because we have.
well, no, because yet you have seen it in different forms. You may say you've seen it in the early stages of it, but the thing is, it's proposed that it takes millions of years to form into a star. To watch it.
We've also seen stars being born.
But you haven't.
No,
I
we
mean,
have.
That's a fact.
No, this is a fact. We have seen stars being born. There are several papers out there that you can actually look up where it shows the stars being born. These are and all this has to do with is mainly gravity. And there's other aspects to it, of course, as far as naturalistic aspects, but we have seen stars being born.
I highly doubt of that. I would like to see some particular evidence, I guess, some peer-reviewed forms for that. But Russ, I am sorry I've gotten so off track from your first question. I don't mean to completely evade so many of the things. It seems like I have been doing that.
Okay, well, the first question, better yet, is simple. I'll simplify it even better. Have you actually looked into any other faith system? Like, have you actually looked into paganry? Have you looked into the Muslim faith? Have you actually looked into the Hindu faith?
Absolutely. The reason why I do or am convinced that the God of the Bible is the living God, the actual God, the existing God, is upon certain evidences, such as I was trying to state earlier, that there is wisdom and uniformity, harmony seen in the concatenation of all things. And so when we look unto the Bible, which is necessarily the book of Christianity, it's proposed and professed to be a divine book, or the book of which comes from God, then we see that the nature of God in that book is that God is an unspeakably wise being, one which does work with very great power, which is invisible in his nature, which is not a justification. There are things which are invisible and do not nullify their existence. And so when looking into reality, I guess is what I'm saying, looking into reality and seeing what aligns with reality in the most reasonable and rational way. What is the what claims, what theories do best explain that? And we see in the Bible, and that's why I don't want to use the Bible as a proof, but that is the book which is professed to reveal or show, I guess in some way, the nature of God. And when you look into reality, into nature, you see that it does align, such as the wisdom, the uniformity, that there is that there's a professed being in the scriptures, but that is transcendent, that is able to, according to a very great power, create things or bring forth things into existence. So I would say that is the first reason. Yet there are so many.
So in other words, one of the first reasons why the God of the Bible is true is because the Bible said so.
Not at all. I know. Sorry, I did not mean to make it sound like that. I'm trying to show that there is a basis for, or more so a a standard, a revealing of the nature of this being, because I don't mean to show that God is just a concept in the mind of man, because if it is so, then man can make God and can form a being into however they do desire it, or in whichever way.
Are you familiar with the study of people with the brains about the whole entire God belief?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so then for those who don't in the chat who don't know, there's a study where a doctor had what had been done was that they asked specific questions on what they believe, and whenever they talked about this, a part of their brain lights up, and then whenever they talk about what somebody they don't know, a stranger, believes, the other side of their brain lights up. But then whenever you ask about what you think God, what God believes and what he says, the same side that recognizes your own self and what you believe is the same side that lights up. So this is a very, very telling sign that that what you said is correct, that gods are indeed concepts of the brain. There's a lot of other ways of figuring out how these gods are concepts of the brains, and most of it you can actually go to the Bible to look at and figure out.
This is actually a good point to bring to one of your statements towards the end of your opening argument, that if there is a God and he does exist, then he would be able to evidence himself to the mind of man, to where the mind of man is able to comprehend the evidences for his existence, or that he does exist in himself. And so to bring it kind of full circle in a way, if there is a God who exists, then he does, or sorry, I shouldn't say that. If he is a deistic God, then he doesn't have to evidence himself at all. But I'm arguing for a theistic God who is personal unto the soul of man. And so if that is the case, then yes, he would evidence himself unto man. And in doing so, that is what the standard is for the nature of God. And what I mean by that is, if there's a God who exists, he does actually reveal himself to man, to the mind of man. And in so doing, gives the blueprint necessarily, imprints it upon the mind of his nature, so that it's not a concoction of certain fancies of the mind of man. And that is what all this ground is trying to prove necessarily, that there is a God based upon what we see and observe with our eyes, that we can see the impressions in nature, we see the precision, and by that we can deduce, but not rashly, not hastily, not just throwing the answer out there that God does, or this is God, because it's so utterly complex and so improbable, it has to be God. It's not that way. That's fallacious, that's irrational, that's unreasonable. I'm not saying that that is the case concerning this matter. I'm more so saying, or what I mean, I guess I should say, is is um,
Okay.
sorry. Oh,
No,
sorry.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I just had I lost and then I got it back. But it's the observing, in the observing certain things in the materialistic world in such a constant manner, because we can always look at a car and say that it was created from the mind of an engineer and brought into existence. We can always say that every single time. It's utterly constant. And so in doing that, and there's certain properties to a car which make it
Yeah, I would definitely stay away from cars because bringing up cars is a category error, because the simple fact is we're talking about human beings. Like God is supposed to create all this naturalistic stuff, and the naturalistic stuff are things that reproduce, and cars cannot. So this is a category error. So I would definitely stay away from using cars.
Okay, so Russ, do you think that the human body, or even particular parts of the human body, are more complex than a car? Not necessarily. I mean, I understand a car can move faster, travel longer distances, and has certain particular properties.
Define what you mean by complex.
That is a good question. What I mean by complex is, in its functionality, in its composition, it is more intricate than the human body, more intricate than a car, in the way that it has different functions which a car is never able to have, such as it can mourn for the dead or have empathy. A car cannot send money to a poor person or give food to someone who's homeless or something like that.
So is your whole entire idea that God created people because we show empathy?
Not at all. My question is, I guess, is the human more complex than a car? Like, is the human body, there's so many functions in the human body, there's so many systems that work together.
So as far as the thing is when you get to atoms and things like that, we're made up of atoms. A car is made up of atoms. When you get to the more wider scope, where you zoom out from that far, you have different functionality. Does not necessarily mean one thing is more complex. I could probably strip down a car engine, and you would probably not realize how complex that engine really is. And it's not a really good, in my opinion, a really good argument, because just because you see more complexity in one thing than another doesn't necessitate a God.
No, it doesn't. And that's not what I'm trying to claim or support in any way.
Well, in a way, you have to see that you kind of are, because you asked me if a human being is more complex than a car. And whenever I had told you that using a car for an analogy is a category error, and in a way you are trying to show the whole entire, it's complex, so that means if the car is complex and it has a designer, the human's complex, it has a designer, type of thing. And so in a way you are trying to say that because you believe the human body is more complex than the car is, that therefore it necessitates a God.
I'm not saying that that alone sufficiently necessitates a God. There's so many underpinnings, I guess, unto the sound of reasoning, unto the reality of God's existence. It's not just one simple thing such as that. Because what I'm saying is, it's constantly observed in the materialistic world that things which are complex have an engineering mind behind it. And so if you rationally and logically look at the body it has very complex parts, pieces, organs.
Yes,
To it,
but
like the heart. The heart
but
is.
the thing is when you come and look at the human body, it has a natural explanation behind how all that develops. That's why there are things called fetuses. We do grow from technically non, if you wish to call it that, non-existence into the existence in the womb, because we go from the sperm, well, not necessarily non-existence, but we go from sperm and egg to more complex things, and that's just nature taking course.
Yes, that's true. It's definitely not non-existence to existence, but the thing is that is a process in itself. And so what I'm
And it's a naturalistic process.
well, that yet
Can you provide, because you were going on with this car analogy, can you provide where a car has naturalistically reproduced on its own?
before I do answer that, sorry, but I need to pinpoint this. The coming forth upon naturalistic means, though, is something which is a very big problem. And I will get back to what you're saying. I'm not trying to evade, but it's a very big problem because the process of reproduction in itself, where did that come from? How did that come about? Because we always do see things being created which have a greater power and ability to create them.
But we see it coming, we see things being created through naturalistic process.
Okay,
A flower doesn't just pop out of nowhere because God said so. A flower pops up because pollination.
Well, yeah, in a way. Or photosynthesis and such. There is much unto it, but I guess what I'm trying to say, the origin of those things. How did those things come into being?
So then one needs to stick mainly towards the whole entire abiogenesis, or if you want to go with the whole entire plant things, the creation of the cosmos, which, as I said in my opening, the thing is when you have the creation of the cosmos, one of the things that the God of the Bible is said to have done is create everything. He created everything that is in existence, which would have to necessitate energy, which he doesn't, because energy, as we know, is eternal because of the first law of thermodynamics. Now, as I also said, if you wish to say that a God has that the energy comes from the God, you're more than I'm more than happy to let you. But the thing is when it comes to naturalistic processes, you have to stick with naturalistic explanations, because we can only go off what we know. And the God hypothesis, when it comes to the creation of everything, is something that is unknown. So, and it also has too many assumptions that go along with it. So this is why you don't need to stick to naturalistic explanations, but more philosophical ones.
I guess the or energy in itself and certain things like that, I would say that it was a created thing as well. Not that, even though it has the properties of being eternal, but that's because it can't be created or destroyed, but that's also in time and space necessarily, in a way.
The thing is when it comes to natural, with nature, you can only deal with what we know and what is within nature. So in order to sit there and to say that this is a necessity, that God necessarily did this, that it's by necessity that God has done this, then again you are going outside the realm of naturalistic of the naturalistic field, and this is something that is a hypothesis that again has one too many assumptions than from the naturalistic point of view.
Well, yes, and that is true, because you do have to go outside of the natural world in the God hypothesis, as what you said. But it's not completely irrational that there is a God who does, or that I'll just say that there is a being who does exist outside of time and space. It just has to be proved to be so with evidence, with sound evidence. And that is, I guess, what I'm trying to say, is that that it is able to be deduced through naturalistic means, not just a blanket or blind application, that because these things are utterly wise in their being and precise in their tuning, I guess, then there is a God. It's not a jumping unto that. There are certain deductions we can, like observation, I guess is what I'm saying, is that things are observed, such as creation. Like when something is created,
okay, so then you
constantly observed.
But the thing is when things are quote unquote created, most of the time it's by naturalistic means. If you can show me a creation that came out of nowhere that nature itself cannot explain, then by all means provide that.
Life, red
Life
blood
did
cells,
not necessarily.
sperm.
No, because again,
Show me how,
these
but how is that
this-
so? I mean, it's assertion. You don't have actual evidence for it. It's just
we
assertion.
actually, the thing is,
Then, okay, then what is it? Tell me it. Show me it.
Again, the thing is with abiogenesis, it is a hypothesis that has sound evidence to show that it,
Which is what
occurs.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm sorry.
So you have the whole entire. Have you? I'm going to assume that you have heard of the Miller-Urey experiment.
I have, yes.
So, with these things, is they, unlike what a lot of people assume, that they were trying to find life or create life, they weren't. They were trying to find if there was by means of primordial Earth, if there was a means to be able to create the building blocks of life, which are amino acids, which they did do. They created amino acids the first go around, but then they realized that it was that some of their findings were off. So when they tuned it, they had actually they created amino acids, but it wasn't the same abundance as it was the first go around. And modern day revisiting of the Miller-Urey experiment, I think as early as 2 years ago, they have found that they can reproduce the experiment, and with knowing the way primordial Earth was, they can create these amino acids, and in which case they did, and it was plentiful. They had it just like the first experiment, but it was the actual right way of doing it. So we have all these different things that occurred during primordial Earth to create amino acids. Amino acids combined together takes long periods of time, yes. And so to ask, have we created life from the amino acids, is a bit foolish to ask for, because the fact that it does take a long time to create these things. It takes a very long time for amino acids to be able to come together to create more complex little organelles. And so then you have all the different actual steps that go with how this goes. Now, again, the means on how this happens is what's in dispute. They have different, all very useful and very reliable means, which is why it's still at the hypothesis stage, because we are in dispute on the mechanisms on how this went about. But to say that there is no evidence for it is foolish and asinine, to say the least.
I would say it's actually completely true in the sense that there is no evidence for it because it is still an assertion. We do not have evidence that amino acids have been turned into even over very long periods of time, which would be utterly difficult to even test, but to be turned into RNA and then DNA, and then from there be able to produce red blood cells and asexual or sexual reproduction. It's a very long process of assertions from there.
But it's not assertions. These are actually, there is science behind it. And this is definitely something that is founded with science. Now, to sit there and say that I can't believe that this stuff happened in that way, therefore God is a God of the gaps fallacy.
That's true, and I'm trying to refrain from doing that and make it clear that I'm refraining from doing that, just rationally and blindly applying God himself unto as the viable option for existence. It's not what I'm doing. I'm saying I'm trying to sift out the false and irrational, the unreasonable
the thing is
explanations. Hold on.
Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me just finish this one point. The reasonable explanations for how life came to be, and not just life itself, but life and matter.
Okay.
And so you have to flush out irrational things. It is actually going back to your first question, why this God? Because you have to discern which or you have to be able to sift through and see what or of the other gods as well. It's not just you pick and choose what you want. It's which God most aligns to reality.
Okay.
And produce evidence.
Because I'm going to grant you this premise. Okay. I'm going to sit there and say, abiogenesis is nothing but a bunch of pseudoscientific bullshit. I'm going to say this.
Well,
I don't believe
curse,
it.
But
I don't believe it, but I'm going to say that that's what it is. It's just pseudoscience nonsense. Okay. So, with your whole entire hypothesis, of God, how did man come to be? In your model of God, how did man come to be?
Boy, that's utterly difficult. That's a utterly difficult and a very good question.
Okay, so let me know. Do you find that the Bible description on how man was created to be accurate? As in God took the dust of the earth, the dirt of the earth, whatever you want to call it, and formed it into man and breathed the breath of life into him.
I do hold fast, or in my conscience, I do hold fast to the fact that there is a divine being, or I should say that matter and life as we know it is existence necessarily, energy even in itself is so complex in its nature and powerful.
So in other words, go ahead.
Let me just finish, just to answer your question, because I don't want to go to another thing. I've been doing that a lot, and I'm sorry, but to answer it, I see that man is very complex. Or anybody can see that man is very complex, and so the creation of man, it would have to be, it's either by naturalistic process or a supernatural process, something which is above what nature can produce. And we have looked at many different possibilities of how life has come into be through a naturalistic process, such as the primordial what is it, the soup, primordial soup, and the extraterrestrial.
That's a mischaracterization.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I'm just saying what the other men phrase it as. Or there was the heat vents a while ago. I believe that's been debunked. But nevertheless, I'm saying that to answer your question, because I definitely don't want to evade, the creation of man must have been very extraordinary. There's no doubt about it, no matter what, in which way you put it. The Bible does state that there is a deity, a being that is able to produce and bring forth. It is that powerful and utterly wise to be able to concoct and bring forth a man out of simple things. And so yes, I do believe.
So you do believe that God took the dust of the earth, created man that way?
I believe it's utterly complex. That is the doctrine which the Bible does state.
Well, it's fine to say that you believe the whole entire creation story to be allegorical. There's plenty of Christians who do follow under that doctrine that the most of the Bible you can take as far as it goes with creation events and all that stuff is allegorical. So that is perfectly acceptable. I'm just trying to get what you personally believe out. Do you believe that the Bible is literally true when it comes to the creation of grabbing dust up and making man with the breath of life? Or do you find that story to be more allegorical?
No, I don't. I don't believe it is allegorical. I believe it is more literal. That is my simple answer. Okay,
so do you know what the main component of dirt is?
No, actually, you'll have to enlighten me on that.
So the main component of dirt is silicone. Is something I actually just recently learned myself. It is silicone. Silicone is what's made primarily from dirt. Now, humans themselves are actually, if you take the components of humans, we are more carbon based and not silicone based. So if we are supposed to have been made from the dirt of the earth, like the Bible says, then why are we not a silicone based organism?
I would say that when things are made, certain different chemical processes can degenerate in a certain way, such as silicone, something something as silicone in dirt, in the infusion of that of a human being, the creation, different chemical processes which come or can degenerate from the dirt, such as that.
So the thing is I would definitely I can concede that yes, there are that if you want to take a bunch of different elements and actually combine them together, that there might be in some sense some breakdown of certain elements. But with the fact that that dirt itself is a more silicone base, regardless of how broken down these elements do get, that should still be the predominant thing within humans, even with being broken down, is that silicone should be what humans are based on, but they're not. So how would one then conclude that the Bible's account of how humans were created to be literally true?
I would say we are not fully sure that dirt was the all-comprehensive element, I guess, of the human body. When in the Bible it says God created man out of the dust.
Yes, and all dust is just pretty much dirt particles.
Yes, you're right. I'm just saying. With different creations, you can create something that is primary, but it's not it doesn't, it's not all pervasive, it's not all comprehensive. And so I would say yes, dirt is important to the formation of man, but I don't think it really is pervasive unto all of the organs and functions and component, or not functions, but organs and systems of man. I think it is a major, but it doesn't mean it has to be all pervasive.
Well, the thing is if it's a major component of man, then you would still have us more silicon based, but we're not. So, regardless, this whole entire idea that we are made of the dust of the earth is really a nonsense style of things. Like, and the reason why I said that there are some Christians that see it as more allegorical is because that is actually a lot more coherent when it comes to what we know about the human body. But I say that we should move on from the naturalistic and move more towards the philosophical, because we're going to go nowhere here, as I pretty much said before. So I would say that one of my biggest problems is why. So if God is the God of the Bible and He is all the omnis, then why is evil in existence?
I agree. It would be good to go into this. I'll finish lastly with the reason why to stay upon naturalistic opinions, theories, and such systems is because there is such a there is so many loose ends in certain particular fields, such as biology, regarding naturalistic explanations for life. But so that's why to stay so much upon it. But to go back to your question, the problem of evil and necessarily Epicurus's statement.
We are at time, so I'll let you finish up your sentence, and then we should go to the closing statements. So, just so you know.
Okay. I would say, all right, those are possibilities. Either God is not able or He is evil, but that also kind of begs the question in a way that that is the only two possibilities of God, and that there is not a third or a fourth or something of that sort, because I would necessarily argue that God is also unspeakably wise in His ways and is able to turn that which is evil into something which is necessarily good, such as the death of a daughter from someone like MADD came up out of a woman who lost her daughter to drunk driving. I'm not saying that the evil is nullified, because it was still an evil matter, but what I'm saying is that if something good can be brought forth out of evil, is that more of a proof of wisdom. And so I would say that there is a third and other options into the fact that yes, evil can be prevented, but I think it'd be more wise to bring forth evil out of good, or to use evil for good, than to just completely prevent every single time. Because how much good is brought forth out of evil? How much is good is brought forth out of certain things like disease or accidents, like Joni Eareckson Tada and Nick Vujicic, two men and women, sorry, who use their incapacities and incapabilities for good. And so that's my closing point.
You got it. And with that, we will go to the closing statement. So now we will have Adam will give his first or only closing statement, and that'll be 5 minutes, followed by Frustrated Atheist who will also have 5 minutes for his closing statement. The debaters don't have to use the full 5 minutes if they don't want to, but they're welcome to. So with that, Adam, I am resetting the clock. And as a reminder to everybody who is listening, if you have questions for the debaters, just let me know by putting in @moderndaydebate in the comments section, and then letting me know who your question is for, and then asking your question. And we appreciate the questions. We've got a good number already, and so keep them coming. And Adam, I have the clock set for you, so I will start it on your first word.
Christian theism does not necessarily deduce just on a blind and rash application that there is a God, because we do see fine-tuning or wisdom in the impressions of wisdom in nature, in the reality of the things which we do see before us. There are very particular reasons why we do deduce upon certain grounds that there is a being which does exist, though he is invisible in his nature, transcendent in his nature as well. And they comprehend many different areas. There is certain things such as the reliability of the scriptures, which we did not go into, but that's very important. The naturalistic explanations, not naturalistic, but what is observable in nature, the explanation for life and matter, things which do exist. There are particular reasons why the theist, the Christian theist, does actually state that there is a God, and that these things were created by this God, who is propounded. And so I do want to make it clear that is not the case of just jumping onto a conclusion that there is a God because of this. When we look at things created, we see constant evidence. We can even look at certain things such as the composition of music, Bach's violin concertos and Mozart's symphonies. When we hear them, we see, or we understand, we comprehend rationally and reasonably that there was a composer behind them, and that these are done, and that this is always the case. When we look at when we hear certain maybe random noises, we do not say that these things have necessarily a composer behind them. They're random noises, and so the matter of the fact is that it's an application by observation. We've always seen things that are created to have an engineer behind them, to be brought into existence by certain ability, necessarily a certain cause, if we could so say. And so it's by evidence, it's by observation, it's also by contemplation. It's looking through and sifting through the possibilities. It is research and doing the diligence of studying every single possible option to know what is the truth, what exactly aligns with reality. And it's not necessarily what aligns with natural reason, because there are things which may contradict in a way reason or go outside of reason, which are still plausible and possible options, such as maybe 500, 600, 700 years ago would have been very irrational for the idea of someone getting across the Atlantic Ocean in one day as a possibility. That would have seemed utterly irrational, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't possible, and we see that is the case. And so when we look at the existence of God, there are very many seemingly irrational things, but when we focus upon just particularly the naturalistic approach to it, then we can see that there is a
30 seconds left.
That there is a sound application to or from a being to creation, in that it actually may or is rational that something so very complex may come from a being which doesn't is not seen with the eye but observed from the evidence set forth.
You got it. Thank you very much. So glad for that. And now we will move into those just in time, Adam, and then we will move into the closing statement from Russ. So Frustrated Atheist, the floor is yours, and I will start the clock on your first word.
So the thing is there a possibility that there are other gods? Sure. That there are gods, period. Sure. There's always a possibility. One of the biggest things is one of the most well thought out one that I've heard of that could exist would be Spinoza's God, where he gave everything he could to start the universe, and that was his dying moment, was starting of the universe. That is one of the more compelling ideas that I've heard. But the topic tonight was the existence of particularly the God of the Bible, in which case if I had to actually take my whole entire thing is that the evidence for such a God has not been brought forth, as far as I'm my own opinion. It was pointed out in the chat, asked if these type of debates ever sways anybody's mind. I would have to agree with that assessment that it wouldn't, that these types of discussions don't, that more often than not people tend to side with whichever side they're going with, and but there are people who do look at it and start to think and actually think for themselves, and do go and do the research and come to whatever conclusions they come from. But as far as I'm concerned, I would say that the evidence for such a God has not been provided tonight. So it still doesn't warrant a belief that such a deity exists. So if I were, I really have not much more to add on that topic, because like I said, to me, just the providing of evidence was not sufficient in my eyes. So I yield my time.
You got it. So thank you very much for your closing statement as well, Frustrated Atheist, and that's about 2 minutes and 45 seconds yielded to the Q&A. So we'd probably go for about 35 minutes, maybe if we can get there, for the Q&A. And so with that, we do have a good list so far, and we take a little bit of time yet, so for the Q&A, if you want to shoot one in there, I'll try to scoop them out and add them to the list. But very excited to ask these that we've got already. So first, I'm just going to go through the super chats first, or in this case we got a super chat from Mr. Cook Jr. Totally appreciate your super chat donation. That, by the way, right now I'm saving up for it, and this will be added in its entirety to the fund for a streaming laptop, so that we can hopefully produce better, basically better nonpartisan debates for you guys. So thank you again, Mr. Cook Jr. Totally appreciate it. And he had said, this is what his question was. So he said that with regard to Adam, so Adam wants evidence for us observing planets and stars being born, but when called for evidence of a God, we're supposed to just take it on faith?
I don't necessarily believe that that was what I asserted. I was trying to show that there is evidence for a God and that it is seen in, or it is found, I guess we could so say, in the complexity, in the observation of nature itself. And so by deduction, and by reason and by logic. I mean, if we think about let's say Da Vinci's paintings, we do not know that Da Vinci existed. We don't. And it sounds strange to even say that, but it's true. How do we not know that there have been people who have just concocted this man, Leonardo da Vinci, but it was somehow these paints all came together, these colors, all came together on a piece of paper, and they attributed it to this one named Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, there's reason why we believe Leonardo da Vinci did paint those paintings of which he did paint, by which actually Leonardo da Vinci said that the human foot is a masterpiece of engineering and a work of art. Just had to throw that in there. But there's a reason why we believe Leonardo da Vinci did create certain artwork. And so it's, even though we do not know if he existed, we have not sufficient evidence. He does not present in this life right now. And so it has to be deduced in those grounds necessarily, because God is not said to be present in the way that a human is. And so because of that, we have to use logic, reason. We have to look at the evidence and see by the impressions, let the impressions draw the mind unto the creator of those things, such as we do with Leonardo da Vinci's paintings.
Can I address something he said?
If you guys want to like allow the other debater to address something, like I'm okay with it, but the only caveat I would say is just if we do it the whole time, just remember we might not get through all the questions. So it's up to you guys, though, to be honest. Like, you're the debater, so.
My contingents is really quick.
Okay. If it's okay with Adam.
If it's okay with you, Adam.
That's okay.
All right. Actually, we can know that Leonardo da Vinci existed. Due to the fact that we do know who his parents were, we do know a lot about Leonardo da Vinci. We also know that it was he who painted these things due to him being an actual person. So these are not just things that we label. These we actually do know he existed. The ones that come more into question are things like Robin Hood, King Arthur, and I think even there's one other individual who comes into mind whenever we debate whether or not they exist or not. But as far as Leonardo da Vinci goes, we know he existed.
Thank you very much from both debaters. And again, Mr. Cook Jr., totally appreciate your super chat. So excellent. And next, Stickman Sam asks, he said, he had to leave early. He said, gotta go soon, but save my question for frustrated atheists in Q&A. What do you think is the strongest argument for theism and why?
The strongest argument for theism? I personally haven't really come across any. One of the ones that does stick out is may or may not be anything like that, but it's definitely a question of how the universe itself got started, because that question is still an open-ended question, and for all we know may forever be. That is a good question for a theist to ask, but as far as arguments that theists have given for the existence, I really haven't found any that are very convincing.
Gotcha. So next is Patient Beard. He asks, question for Adam, why did God route the laryngeal nerve around the aorta and back up to the voice box? What was God thinking when he engineered that? And why is it the same in a giraffe?
I would say, I would say it is possible that God created it to be, or in such a way, for certain let's see. Let me scratch that. I'm sorry. Let me scratch that. I would say I'm not sure why the Lord would create something in such a way. I'm not well learned in that particular organ of the body, or how it has any distinct resemblance to that of a giraffe's, but my not understanding that, I don't think, proves that it wasn't still a wise and plausible creation of God himself.
Gotcha. You bet. Thank you very much. And then we have from Iron Charioteer. It's a regular. Good to see you. And as well as a lot of these are regulars. So Jared, thank you for your question. And next question for Adam. Is it inconceivable to comprehend that organic life came from inorganic matter rather than magic?
I would say, one, it's never been observed after a certain manner. It's never been proved that that organic matter has then, after coming from inorganic matter, has then turned into something that is functional as a human being, which is conscious and able to perform things which certain simple molecules are not. I would say creation is more conceivable than something popping into existence or coming forth out of something by chance, because that's necessarily magic. You're necessarily saying that is magic because it's never been perceived. It's supernatural. It's not according to the laws of nature. And so no, I don't think creation is magic in the sense, but I do think it's supernatural, and so would organic matter coming from inorganic.
Gotcha. You betcha. Next, we have from Tom. This is his first question. This is question to the theist. By the way, Tom, got your question, your second question that you just asked. This is for Adam. Are you familiar with the concept of emergence, which does not require a more complex thing or mind to explain a lower order phenomena?
I think it's important with that, with emergence, that that particular proofs of that are brought forth, in that it is actually evaluated that something, I guess, less complex has created something that is more complex. We could, or just as equally complex, I guess, even thinking of reproduction, it seems as if it's something that is less complex, creating something that is more complex in a sense. But when we evaluate the actual process of reproduction and the two parties which are involved in it, we do see that that there still is an unspeakable complexity to the process, to the conception of it necessarily. And so I would say okay, what are the proofs for emergence? What can we see? And maybe it is best to use the argument that particularly life itself and complex beings, even molecules, are in their origins must be brought forth by something which is or has ability to bring them forth.
Got it. Thank you very much, Adam. And then thank you for your question again from, well, for everybody. In case I missed it, sometimes I forget to say thank you, and for any previous ones as well. So Pine Creek asks, question for the theist: if Adam's God created absolutely nothing, would there be any sin or evil and any less love?
I'm sorry, can you rephrase that? I didn't quite hear the beginning.
You bet. So he had, Pine Creek asked, if your God created absolutely nothing, so never created, would there be any sin or evil, and would there be any less love than there currently is?
I would say it doesn't matter because it's not the case. And so trying to focus upon, I guess, real things that that are actually in existence, like sin and particular sins, or in love and certain things like that. These do exist, and they must have sound and reasonable arguments for their existence, whether I'll actually end there.
You bet. So very thankful for that question, as well as mentioned from Pine Creek. So we have Pine Creek question for the theist: is there anything that Adam's God could do that would cause Adam to stop worshiping him? And there's also a question for the atheist. So we will let Adam answer first, and then we will ask the question for frustrated atheist.
I would say there's many things which are very difficult to comprehend, which the Lord does. Obviously, so many things are brought forth and constantly from the atheists, particularly out of the scriptures, which are very difficult, again, to comprehend as morally correct and such. But yet, I would say some things may actually have reason, good sound reason for them, which good sound reason for them, which render it still wise and a good in itself. And so I would say, though God does things which are unspeakably difficult to comprehend and seemingly, at least to natural reason, immoral in certain of that sort, I believe there are certain reasons behind those things. If the Lord were to strike me with cancer or kill all of my family, I would trust that it was for good. That sounds utterly ridiculous, but by constant observance in the Lord's goodness, even out of seemingly evil things, I see that there can be much good actually in it, and a lot of times it depends upon the heart of people. How many who have like certain illnesses, which is grievous, nevertheless.
Maybe, so sorry, just to make sure that we for sure get through all the questions, I have to ask you to just be a little bit more pithy with your answers.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I'll end there. I'll just end there. Keep going.
You got it. No problem. So we just have a lot of great questions, and so forgive me for cutting in, but thank you very much for Pine Creek and also for Adam, both for question and answer. So next, we do, as mentioned, for frustrated atheists, Pine Creek also asked him, is there anything that would cause Russ to start worshiping God?
To start worshiping God, and I will wait for the answer, Pine Creek. But are we talking about Yahweh or just a God concept?
I think that he's referring to Yahweh.
I think he's referring to Yahweh as well, but I want to be clear with my answer. So,
yeah, we can.
okay, yes, he said if Yahweh is real, then anything he does. Oh, well, no, he's talking to somebody else now. Sorry. Um, so, I'm going to assume that he said Yahweh. That he meant Yahweh. If Yahweh, as defined by the Bible, were real, there's no question about it. To be honest, I would still say no, because the only thing that would change is my belief in him. So I would go from atheist to mesotheist, because the God from the Bible, if he is true to be the outline of the Bible, is in from what I can tell, is a very moral monster for a lot of different acts and things that he does commit within the Bible itself. So I would say no, there would be nothing that could actually get me to worship him. As far as believing in him, I would have no choice, because he exists and he was right there for me to be able to verify.
Gotcha.
May I ask a quick question about that, concerning that?
If it's okay with frustrated, and if it's
fine with
quick.
me.
Okay. Do you think you could be conceiving morality wrongly? And it could be short. It could be a short answer. But do you think that is it possible, I guess I should say, that what looks immoral could be immoral? Is it possible?
No.
All right.
Not when it comes to these. Not when it comes to the acts that were outlined by God in the Bible. No. For instance, I'll even throw out an example. His whole entire killing of the different people, including and there was a couple of verses where he specifically tells us to kill, it told his chosen people to kill not only the adults, male and female, but also the children and infants. To me, there's no way to make that a moral right.
Gotcha. So next we will go to Godless Galaxy has a question, and so thank you for your answers to that question, and thank you for the question. And Godless Galaxy asks, question for Frustrated: have you heard of the RNA hypothesis? If so, what's your opinion about it?
Yes, I have heard of the RNA hypothesis, and to be honest, I tend to agree with the scientists on that hypothesis, due to the fact that when you look at RNA has the ability to it uses substitutions. Unlike DNA, it uses certain strings of amino acids, whereas RNA has a substitution thing that then can revert itself back to DNA. And because of that, that seems more RNA coming before DNA sounds more plausible than DNA coming before RNA.
Gotcha. Thank you very much. Godless Galaxy also has a question for Adam. Why do you keep using non-biological as being analogous to humans? So I think he means like non-biological things as being analogous to humans.
That was a good question. I would say one, because they're very consistent and they have certain properties which do render them similar unto what we would call divinity necessarily. And so because of their consistency, because we can observe them, and because they have certain properties such as wisdom behind them, judgment, an understanding mind, and those things are able to be rightly deduced, or I guess applied more so to divinity, to the reality of a supernatural and transcendent being. That is why I do necessarily use those.
Gotcha. Thank you for your answer. And next one we have up is from Karag Nightwolf. For the theist, do you think there is free will in heaven? And if there is, how could there not be sorrow in heaven? For example, you would know family are in hell and grieving.
That was a good question too. I would say there free will is a concept necessarily that can only exist in the bounds of the possibility of there being no free will. That is how we get the concept of free will. We can deduce, I guess, or discern, more so discern what free will is. And so I would say in heaven there is no such thing as free will, because that it is existing. It is the necessarily existing. But for the question, or the part of whether a soul will be able to sorrow for those who are damned, I would say the soul will not be sorrowful, because the offense of which the offense is necessarily of which the human, even if it is a brother or a sister, a mother or a father, does transgress against the Lord, is far more grievous unto the soul. And so it is it is a counterbalance necessarily. They know it is just. They have grieved and grievously sinned against the Lord. It is a just matter. And so I guess I'm going to conclude there.
You got it. Thank you very much. Totally appreciate your answer, Adam. And then we have, thanks by the way for Karag's question. And Patient Beard, coming at you again, Adam. He said, Adam said that he deduced God. What other possibilities did he eliminate, and how did he know they were false?
I'm sorry, James. Can you repeat that question?
No problem. So Patient Beard asked, he said, Adam said that he deduced God, but what other possibilities did he, Adam, eliminate, and how did he know they were false?
I would say one of the ways to come unto the knowledge of God, and particularly the reality of his existence, is by deduction, through observable evidence, such as materialistic things, which we've talked about many times. But concerning what have I flushed out, I would say I've endeavored to very diligently look at every angle that I know of, to my, I guess, to the best of my ability or knowledge. Yet there is still a point where one is completely, where one is able to be convinced of something. Let's say a mathematical theorem, to where there other possibilities are not conducive, I guess, unto that theorem. So I would say there is also a point where you are convinced of something, such as the fact that I exist. I'm convinced of that. There are theories, opinions, and such, which may try to combat that and overthrow it. But because I am convinced of that upon good grounds, then I will hold fast to that claim. And so I'm saying necessarily that is the case with the reality of God's existence in the deduction of his, or in the proof of his evidence, in his fingerprints necessarily, and deducing from that it is so.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Adam. And as mentioned, thank you very much, Patient Beard. So, Inquiring Mind asks, how does I think this is my must be for Adam because it implies it. So how does he use logic to determine which God exists?
Logic, I would say, is necessary. This is a complex field, if we could so say. The origin of logic and such, and the rationality of logic is very important in conducting, I guess, a reasonable conclusion for the existence of God. I would say the type of logic or how to come to that logic, or how one does come to that logic, is very much based upon a certain objective law or laws, I guess, of logic necessarily, because logic does have laws. When we say something is illogical, it is something which does transgress the laws of logic. And so I would say the logic concerning the evidence for God's existence, the concluding that there is a God, it must be exactly proportional. It must fit perfectly unto the laws of nature. And it goes back to, where do those laws come from, and how were they created or not, which I do believe they were, but that's completely, I mean, you'll have to go into many different, it's multifaceted. So
You bet. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. And then thank you as well to for everybody's questions. We've only got we don't have too many more, so this is good that we're going to, I think, fit them all in. And Tom asks, question to the theist: are you familiar with the concept? Oh, we asked that. That's embarrassing. Okay, so we have Bud Askins who asks. This is if you don't follow football, no pressure. I'm embarrassed to say, people sometimes they ask me if I like to follow football, and I'm like, I have no idea what's going on in football. But question for both: who will win the Super Bowl?
You go, Russ.
If I had to take a guess, since the Pats are there, most likely the Pats.
One thing, I was wondering if Tom asked that again, because I didn't necessarily answer pretty thoroughly his question. I was just wondering if that was the case, but if not, then that's all right too.
I don't think so.
Is it in order?
I thought that I might have accidentally just copy and pasted it into the list twice.
Okay, all right. I'm just making sure about that. But according to
Tom,
Askins,
correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry about that, Tom, if I was wrong. Sorry to cut you off, Adam. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no problem. Sorry about that, too. According to Bud Askins' question, honestly, I do not care. I don't even know. I think that football sports are practically utterly vain. I know that's a pretty strong statement, but I think there's far more important things to spend time in. And so I don't even know who's in the Super Bowl. I guess the Patriots or something. Since that's not my decision, I'm saying I don't care. But I would anyway. That's it.
What a critic. That's okay. That's all right. That's I'm just teasing you. Okay, so basically we Tom said. Oh, okay. So Tom just mentioned that he reposted the same question to make sure that I got it. So we got that one covered. And so want to say thank you for everybody's questions. I would love to get the debaters' opinion on one thing. It wasn't my idea. So basically, we are thankful to have the debaters here, and we've been kind of talking this up, and some people are repulsed by it, but I like getting other debaters' opinions on some of these debates, because you guys yourselves are debaters, and so you've been through it, you know what it's like, and you've seen some of the topics that are out there. But we have a debate coming up shortly, and you'll be able to see it in just a second on if you both, Adam and Russ, if you both have the screen up to see the video as it rolls on YouTube Live. We have a debate coming up Monday is internet atheism a hate cult? And we adapted it, so now it's technically, is atheism a hate cult? Which I think that seems like it's even more hard to defend because, oh wait, hold on, it's not at 9 p.m. I screwed that up. It's at, forgive me if you're watching this, it's at 8 p.m. Monday. Ah, that's embarrassing. Okay. What are your guys' thoughts? I worry a little bit. Hey, I'm fair. I'm willing, if somebody wants to debate whether or not Christianity is a hate cult, we'll have them on. So I'll at least be fair that way. But I'm curious if you think this is a good idea or you think this is a terrible idea if people are going to go crazy.
So the thing is if this is going to be just, is atheism a hate cult? One thing that I think that it's, to me, it's not a good topic because only for the fact that atheism in itself doesn't, in my opinion, and HistoryNet, who's in the chat, will definitely disagree with me, but atheism in itself is not a cult. It fits no, using dictionary definitions of what a cult is definitely terrible because it doesn't encompass everything. And so the best way to use the word cult is to find a way in order to figure out behaviors within certain groups of society and try to see if these behaviors do indeed signify some kind of wrongdoing, in which case using the bite model is a great way to figuring that out. And to be honest, that the debate, the components, the two opponents on there, I have one issue with one, which would be Dean Esme, because he is vitriolic towards atheists in general. Even though he says that he is A-okay with them, he constantly attacks just about any atheist he comes across that doesn't agree with him. And if you don't agree with him, you're automatically a hate cult. So he's already a bit biased.
Adam, what are your thoughts? I know that it's perhaps provocative.
Honestly, James, I have no comments concerning the matter. I have no comment.
You got it. All right. Well, we're excited for that. That's coming up Monday. But more importantly, I want to say I honestly totally appreciate the debaters. You guys have studied. You hit the books. You guys are what makes this channel have any value at all, is that you guys hit the books and share your ideas. The goal here is to kind of do a lot of vicarious learning in the sense that, you know, the debaters come on and they share what they've read, and then my hope is that people basically are able to benefit, because it's kind of like, well, you know, sometimes you read a book and you're like, okay, I got like 5 points that were really good from that book, and the time it took to read those 5 points in the book amongst all the other parts of the book was like 25 minutes compared to the 8 hours I put in the book. And so my hope is that these debates kind of capitalize on that, where the debaters are bringing up the best points that they've read. And so and I definitely just appreciate you guys sharing that. So thank you guys very much for coming on.
Thank you for having me, James.
Not a problem. It was I enjoyed it.
My pleasure. Yeah, I'm glad, and it was cordial too. So it's like, again, another bonus. And everybody, the speakers' links or emails are down in the description box. Highly encourage you to check them out. If you, like I said, even in the event you were against their ideas, well, you can at least get to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so you can know that you're hearing like the most sincere case rather than any sort of straw man or something from somebody else. So
one thing I would recommend, though, if you do go to anybody's channel, look at some of their earlier videos and look at their videos now today and see on what positions they have changed.
That's a great point. Someone else just mentioned that recently.
Cyrus.
Oh yeah, that's right, Cyrus. Yeah.
And I agree wholeheartedly, because there's one video I have out about morality, and my position has changed since then.
Gotcha. Well, I think that's a great idea. So that way you can kind of know where they're at today, and because they may have recanted, or maybe not even recanted, but just changed their mind about something. So definitely agree with that. So thank you for the audience for your questions. These are great questions. Just a blast to have everybody here and to get to read your questions. And also, it's thank you for your help as people giving ideas in terms of how to improve the software for our streams, and also the encouragement. Thanks, Tom. Saw that. It means a lot. And yeah, so and your feedback. So totally appreciate it, everybody. And we hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. Take care.